نحن أعوذ بالله الرحمن الرحيم. So in the last class we were discussing um how the khutbah and what it basically talks about. We talked about the Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, alladhi, and so on and so forth. And we talked about the word ibda', salah, nabi, and we basically covered the khutbah till wa huwa al-musta'an. And today, inshallah, we will be continuing on to our next portion, and we will be beginning the Muqaddimah of the kitab. The Muqaddimah is also, you could call it the introduction of the book. Um, and yeah, inshallah, we will begin by reading the text itself and then translating, and then I'll explain it how it works, and then inshallah we'll translate it. Okay, so starting from here. اعلم أن العلم يطلق على معان أحدها حصول صورة الشيء في العقل، ثانيها الصورة الحاصلة من الشيء عند العقل، ثالثها الحاضر عند المدرك، رابعها قبول النفس لتلك الصورة، خامسها الإضافة الحاصلة بين العالم والمعلوم. Okay, so what this text is basically telling us, it is explaining the different uh the definitions of knowledge. How do you define what knowledge is? This text, this part of the text is explaining the possible definitions of what knowledge is. But before we get to that, we need to understand that before even defining knowledge, there has been some sort of a difference in opinion if whether knowledge can even be defined. And we'll just go into that slightly just right now. There have been different groups of people, different groups of scholars who have held different positions over history. And I'll just make a separate page for this. Okay. So basically, philosophers and scholars, they have differed whether knowledge even has a real definition. Some believe that it is zahir, it is clear, so it doesn't really need a so evident that it doesn't require a definition, right? So that's one view, that it is zahir. Write it down. So therefore, it does not require a definition. It's so obvious that it does not require a definition. That's one view. And then they would say that okay, it does require, and then among the we defined, so we can say it, the second view would be it can be defined, but then those who believe it can be defined own little difference of opinion that and will be defined, then there you could say that um one group of scholars say that its true nature cannot really be grasped. Its true nature cannot be grasped. That it is mumtani'. That, well, it's quite obvious that to define knowledge, defining knowledge is a form of knowledge itself. So you can't really define something with its for sort of circular sort of reasoning. So they believe that even though we can sort of define it, but its true nature cannot be grasped. Others say that its true nature can be grasped. Its true nature can be grasped, and it is zahir. That is can be grasped, and it's pretty easy to understand what it is. It is uh, يمكن الحصول or سهل الحصول. Yeah, سهل الحصول is a better word, so that it's easy to grasp. And the third group, they said that its true nature can be grasped, but it is difficult. Its true nature can be grasped, but it is difficult. Or it is متعر الحصول. Its true nature can be grasped, but it is difficult to do so. Now, when they say it's difficult, so they after this those definitions, okay? So they propose definitions after this. Um, through logical approach. So now, coming back to the text itself, writer, the author has proposed several different definitions for knowledge, and these are some of the definitions. You see that when we define easy, it's not the easiest of hard to define knowledge. So, you could so popped up over the years, in history, but discarded because they have too many objections on them. The main definitions that have been going around are around 13, but the author over here has mentioned only 5 because these are the better ones according to the author. And we'll go through them one by one, okay? But before we start going through them, it is still important for us to understand how to approach this. Okay, so remember that whenever you think of something, whenever we conceive something, whenever we get knowledge of something, there are several distinct things involved. Okay, so in conception, in gaining knowledge, there are several things that are involved. It's not just one thing that's happening. Okay, it's not just one thing that's happening. It's multiple things. So the first of that is the acquisition. That's the first thing that happens. The acquisition, or in Arabic you would call this the husul of the form or the concept, the acquisition of the form or the concept of the thing that you understand. That's one thing that happens. The second thing that happens, or the second thing that is involved in the acquisition of knowledge is the form that the form it's that is present in the mind. And then the third thing is the soul's perception. And in Arabic, we would call this idrak. Idrak. Okay. So these are the three things. So it's not just one. horse, okay? Imagine you see a horse, then you getting knowledge of that horse, you understanding, okay, that horse is standing there. That's knowledge, but it's not just one thing that's happening. It's three things that we have pointed out. First of all, there's the event that the form of the horse enters your mind. So there is the event that happening. That's the acquisition part. That's the first thing. Then the second thing that happens is that the horse, the concept of the horse, the form of the horse is now in your mind. It exists now in your mind. That's the second thing that happens. And then the third thing is you being aware of the horse. That is a state that you are in, and that is the third thing that happens. Okay. Okay. So these are the three things that we need to sort of distinguish in order to start defining what knowledge itself is. And these are not identical per se. Um, so that's the first step to understanding the discussion that happened in the text. Okay. So now we can move on to definitions. So some ulama defined knowledge to be the acquisition of form or the concept of the thing. So they just define this first part as knowledge itself. So the acquisition of something, the acquisition of the form, the acquisition of the concept in the intellect, in the mind, is called knowledge. So that's the first group. I'll just copy and paste this here because to save some time. Okay, that's the first group that said it is the acquisition, it is the action that's happening, it's the event that's occurring. They say that's knowledge. Okay. Example to be imagine there's a glass that's empty. Okay. Imagine there's a glass that's empty and you start pouring water in to of water is the acquisition of water, and similarly that's what they define to be knowledge as. So imagine that you're pouring in knowledge. This event of gaining knowledge is knowledge itself, they say. And we can already see why this might be a little problematic, but let's continue. The second definition is they say, okay, they disagree with the first. They say, oh, it can't be um the acquisition, it can't be the gaining of knowledge, it can't be the event. It is actually the form that exists in your mind. It is the form that exists in your mind after the event. That is knowledge, okay? And that is very identical to the second thing that we identified over here that happens when you are gaining knowledge. So they just isolated the second part and they said, okay, this is knowledge. So imagine again the water example, the example about the water. Um, so it's not the event anymore. They say it's okay, it's not the event. It is actually the water once it has been poured. This water would be knowledge, if that makes sense. So they say this water is knowledge. It is the thing that is present inside the mind. That is knowledge. So that's what the second group of people say. Third thing. Um, and if I want to explain this a bit more, why the second is, remember that if you if this is a bit like more, I skip this was just really interested in knowing. Um, it is because the acquisition part of gaining something is something that does not exist independently. It is an abstract thing. It's you can't really perceive it. Like for example, imagine there are two books, right? There are two books and those two books are next to each other. Okay? There are two books that are next to each other. Now, you can't really imagine or you can't really point out which book is next to the other. So for example, imagine there are two books here. Okay. So this is one book, and then it is stacked onto another book. Okay. Now this is book one, and this is book two. Now these books are next to each other. We know that, but can you point to the next two-ness? Like where do you see that it's next to each other? Where's the next two-ness? So we understand from this, okay, we can't really point to it because the next two-ness is something that is abstracted. It's something that is abstract. You can't really point to it. So similar, the people who disagree with the first one, they argue that, okay, acquisition in a similar sense is something that it is just a relationship that's happening, but no itself is not a relationship. Knowledge is something that is real. Knowledge is something that is not that abstract, so it can't be an event. Knowledge cannot, it has to be something else. And that's the argument for why this first the first is good. Okay. Then comes the third definition. Okay. The third definition, remember that it worsens. Okay. And I'll explain what this means. Presence. It basically means that the form that came into your mind after the acquisition part, the form that it is in your mind, unless that form is present to you, unless that form is present to you, there cannot be any inkishaf. There cannot be any uncovering that happens. There cannot, new things cannot be perceived. You can't really perceive something unless that form is present in your mind. So they say that knowledge is the presence of the object, is the presence of the object to or near the. So basically, it is present of the form in the knower's mind or intellect. Okay, so that's what they define knowledge is presence. But then there is another objection. Presence is not enough because something being present in your mind does not necessarily mean that you have actually received it. Why? Because think of someone who is just in class. Then the information is present and it goes into their mind, but there is no reception. They're not really it's present, they're not receiving it. For example, if you're just listening to something and you're just listening to it for the sake of listening, you're not paying attention to it at all, it is going into your mind, but it's not giving you any new knowledge. It's just noise in your mind. So a noise is a very good example, actually. So like noise just goes into your ears and you can't really perceive anything. So it is present in your mind, but it's not giving you any sort of there's no reception there. So that's an objection. And the next definition would fix that objection, saying that knowledge is actually the soul's acceptance of the form. Okay? Knowledge is the soul's acceptance of the form. Knowledge, soul acceptance of the form. So even if it is present, it needs received properly for it to count as knowledge. The soul's acceptance of the form. Okay. And then the final definition that the author has given us is back to the relationship, because the the last four was actually building on each other. So the first one wasn't enough, then the second one wasn't the third one wasn't enough, then the fourth one. But then in the fifth one, they sort of circled back to it being a relationship. So they're saying that knowledge is actually a relationship between knower and the known. So the person who knows and the thing that he is understanding, it is that relationship that exists, and that is knowledge. That in essence is knowledge. So these are the five definitions that the author has given, and this has been a sort of an explanation as well. Now what we'll do is we'll go back to the text and we'll translate it and see if it can be fitted onto it. Okay. So اعلم, start reading from here. اعلم أن العلم يطلق على معان. So اعلم is فعل أمر هادر معروف. It says know. It's a command that know that علم, that knowledge, يطلق على معان, that it has إطلاق. It can be that it is, yeah, it has إطلاق for many meanings. So it can mean many things. أحدها, the first of those meanings, or the definitions, حصول صورة الشيء في العقل. حصول العقل. The first of them is the acquisition, حصول. So if you go back here, so حصول الشيء, the حصول, the acquisition of the for the or not, um, form a thing or of عقل in the intellect. So حصول addition of something in the mind, acquisition of the form in the mind. Definition that we also wrote down in our explanation. ثانيها, the second definition, الصورة الحاصلة من الشيء عند العقل. It is the form that has been acquired from something in the intellect or near the intellect. So now they're not talking about the event that here. It is the form itself that has been near intellect. That, um, the third definition is al-hadir mudrik. Al-hadir means something that is the one who is basically the knower. In al-hadir in the mudrik, we wrote idrak over here somewhere. Yeah. So the soul's perception. So the believing it is the is um, al-hadir in the There's been some internet connectivity issues right now. Okay. So, as I was saying, that قبول النفس لتلك الصورة, it is the acceptance of the soul for that surah, for that image, for that form, for the concept. So it is the acceptance, like we said, the fourth definition. خامسها, the fifth definition, الإضافة, relationship الحاصلة, that is obtained بين العالم, between the knower, والمعلوم, and the thing that is known. So it is the relationship that is obtained between the knower and the known. And this is the better definition out of all of them, and it of the majority of the mutakallim. So this we basically started with the definition, and we sort of find it that okay, the knowledge is slightly different aspects taking place. It is your game. It is the awareness of the thing, and we sort of qualified the definition, and then we are. It is the idafa. It is the relationship that is obtained between the knower and the known. So inshallah, we will continue tomorrow into the types of knowledge now. So now since we know what it is, we can move into how knowledge divide types. And yeah, that's it for today. Jazakumullah khairan wa salamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.